Before we begin, this video was recorded prior to the announcement of Echoes of the Fallen and the Rising Tide. Echoes of the Fallen has since released. It's around a 3-hour DLC. It'll cost you $10 right now. It's pretty good. I really like the boss fights, but honestly, I wanted more. The Rising Tide, however, should be a more substantial DLC because you are getting more information on Leviathan, and you do get to add Leviathan as an icon ability, which I think is pretty exciting. So we're really looking forward to that, and it happened to answer the DLC questions that we had in the video. With all that out of the way, please enjoy. Now that we've had time to talk about and sit on Final Fantasy 16, because it's going to be winning a number of game awards, at least we hope, and we consider it one of the best RPGs of the year, I think it's time we go back and take a look at this game in regard to where it ranks amongst the main series. So before we begin, we're going to talk about the current tier list that I have up on the screen here. Brad can't see it. He's just going to guess. So we had an S+. We had
nine. Final Fantasy, not 9.
9's one of them.
Okay, cool.
6 and 7. Do we have any disagreements in S+?
No.
For S, we have 8, 12, 14, and 7 remake. Any disagreements?
No. We got a few comments for 8 being that high, but I think it deserves to be
people.
there, so.
I thought people were upset more about like where we put 10.
There were much more. Yeah, there were much more comments about 10, but there were a few about 8. But yeah.
Okay, so with A, we have 4 and 15. I think that's pretty accurate. I mean,
yeah.
we could always slot 15 into B, but I think as totality, as the game stands now, 15 is an A. Right? I love Noctis, love those characters. For B, we have 1, 2, 5, 10, and 11. I'm assuming people are going to always be upset when we had placed 10. That's completely fine. We justified it in our video. Some people were really upset. Some people were okay with it. Whatever. With C, we have 3 and 13. Now, there are some people I know who are upset at 13. They hold that very highly for some reason because they're in love with Lightning and some of the characters there. I get that. Are there any games that are out of place right now? Your opinion?
I don't think anything's happened since we did the other than 16 being released. I don't think it changed anything. So,
our list is essentially exactly what it's supposed to be. Now, let's talk about 16 now that we have time to reflect on the game. Brad, how do you feel about 16 after everything has been said and done? After you played the game completely, you got I think you did a lot in that game too. You put a lot of hours into it. How do you feel about 16 right now?
Pretty much. It was a fantastic story. You know, voice acting was very well done. You know, they've come a long way, with the voice actors. Story, very intense. It kind of dropped off kind of near the end, the last chapter or segment, act, if you would. The Odin chapter was kind of meh, but some of the greatest summon fights or icon fights in the series. So originally when I was playing through it, I think I had like rose-colored glasses. I think I was too happy, but the more I played it, the more I'm like, I kind of missed some of the older game mechanics.
Right.
The hack and slash is not my thing. It was cool looking, and it was kind of quality of life. It was accessible, but I'm more of a strategy guy. I like having a party and the management aspect and being able to like power level and equip a bunch of equipment with different attachments and the materia system, or whatever. In 9 you had the SP stuff. So I like the granular management that was completely absent here, other than his skill tree. But once again, you could just respec at any point with anything. And then once you figure out your gameplay, after I got Bahamut, I basically didn't change anything about my loadout until the end of the game.
Were you using Bahamut? I really didn't use Bahamut the entire time.
I used a lot of his abilities.
Okay.
I didn't care for his charge up thing where it like just rained down stuff, like where you just float in the air and let it charge.
Yeah, mostly I was just using Ifrit and Odin because that damage output was insane.
Yeah, I didn't care for the Odin abilities. Like I know that they were very powerful, but I had a I had a system of absolute burst damage. So it was just like a bunch of dots and then unleash like 3 or 4 abilities, and the last one being the Bahamut like death ray or the giga
the Giga Flare.
the
Yeah,
giga
yeah.
flare.
Amazing.
Because you do the it's been a while since I played, so I don't remember all the abilities, but you do the ice crystal. When you shoot it, it would like damage all the enemies,
Right.
and then you would do there was another one that just does like a damage over time AoE thing, and then you basically shoot the giga flare at the character and then the ice thing, and you're basically just like compounding. I would basically cheese 90% of the fights just by doing like one combo.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and it looked cool, and I just really big numbers. Like I think outside of the icon fights, I think I hit like 200,000 damage in one combo, like some ridiculous crazy numbers.
Felt good. So it didn't really feel like, I mean, it's still Final Fantasy to you, right?
Yeah.
Is what I'm
Well, so the fact that the story was so good, like the fact that the game was so well made, right? Like
Yeah,
I really,
very polished.
as far as like the development or the polish of the game, like it's definitely a main title feeling game. Just there was just some components that just felt lacking or shallow.
Shallow.
But once again, I am from the generation. I'm from the section of people that like grinding and hardcore battles or long drawn out battles,
turn-based RPGs, right?
Right.
Okay.
Tactical, yeah.
I mean, I think like after beating 16, I really didn't like take too much time to think about it, but I like after looking at all the footage I had for the game, I really enjoyed the narrative. I really enjoyed the characters. I actually look back at Odin and think that fight was actually better than what I originally felt about it, because I think that the problem was you go into these 2 spectacle fights just before. Massive fights with Bahamut and Titan, and Odin felt like a grounded one-on-one fight, right? But it was built up to be that way. And I think that as a character, and I can't remember the old dude's name, man, but I think he's better than expected, right? I think that the fight itself was really good. I think the music in this game is phenomenal and should win multiple awards. I think the visuals are top-notch, best in the series. I just think that like as a, probably where the shallowness kind of comes in is at times with the combat, because, and I only think that's a me problem. I think it's a subjective thing, primarily because once you kind of figure out what works in combat, you really don't want to do anything else, because it's almost effective against every boss when you have a certain build or lineup. So I look back at 16 really fondly. I really like this game, but like when other titles started to come out, the Baldur's Gate 3s and stuff like that, I was like, okay. And then when I look at the other Final Fantasies, I was like, I think the only thing that was missing, honestly, was probably like additional party control, right? Kind of that lack of diversity with party members. Like they were there, and that's great. And you brought this up, I think, when we talked about our discussion, our spoiler review for the game, that one of the biggest problems with 16 is that you have party members with you, but you had no control over them. So you really couldn't decide how they were going to act. And they weren't like in the way at all. Like they were perfectly fine. I really like what you do with Torgal, but I really feel like you could have done more with him as a character in terms of just being a setup or a support character. Same thing with Jill or Sid or whomever. I think that's like my only big issue with the game. But otherwise than that, this is like the most polished Final Fantasy title, mainline, not counting 7 Remake. I think that's going to be like its own thing, because when 7 Rebirth comes out, we have to redo this entire list, and I don't know how we're going to do it. Should we just call it like a pseudo sequel, that type of stuff? But with like 15 left a bad taste in my mouth because of just how many things were left with cliffhangers and different plot holes. Yeah. And then they had to put DLC out. You had to get the Royal Edition to actually complete the game. And 16 comes along, and it's, in my opinion, definitive. Now there is the DLC that's going to be, brought out for the game, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I think as a whole, I really enjoyed Final Fantasy 16. I don't know if there was anything that held me back from loving it, because you're right, the rose-colored glasses, man, I was like, God, this game was holy shit.
Like, playing the demo, like I had goosebumps at the end of it. Like,
yeah,
obviously the prologue was like very dramatic. It was like very intense, especially the way it ended. It was just like holy crap! Like if this is the first 2 hours of the game, what's the other 40 hours? You know,
Yeah, what's the rest of the game going to look like moving forward?
And I really felt like it scaled very well until after the Bahamut fight. Like I'm gonna say at least plateaued. Like
I really feel like if they had put Odin in between Bahamut and Titan, I would have been okay with that. But I still think the fight with Odin is probably just overlooked because Bahamut was such an epic encounter, and Titan was like a 3-piece meal for no fucking reason. Like to have a character who was essentially like, you know, there for the first third of the game and then not even, you know, talked about in Kupka. It was like, oh great. And then you look at, you know, even the first major fight with the Icon, I can't remember her name, she's escaping right now, but even that fight right there, that was an epic ass fight, but it also felt more personal than, it kind of felt like it was akin to Odin's fight, where it was like more one-on-one. There wasn't exactly this big spectacle involved at times. So I agree. Like I wouldn't say, I don't know if plateau is the right word. I would say like you had that. I think you can't hit that extreme high around 2/3 of the game, and then never have that high replicate again. Because even with the last fight, I felt like that. So the last fight's probably like my biggest problem with the game. It did drag a bit. Like that was a long ass fight. Like that.
Well, it was a cool sequence. Like it was a cool, you know, the
100%.
You know, when Bahamut brought up and they had the sky duel, and then you know other things happened, and then you fight Ultima, and then for some reason you just sacrifice yourself. Like you couldn't have blown it up in any other.
We couldn't have just blown this shit up earlier. You know what I mean? We just had to be dramatic.
You couldn't have been on the outside of it and then like shot your hellfire into it or something. I don't know. You just self-destruct yourself.
100%. It was a weird sequence, but I think that ultimately, you know, 16 had a lot of promise. So, throw that out of the way. Where does 16 rank on the tier list? Where are you putting it? Be careful. This could upset some people.
Yeah.
Because I have it as an S game. I do. I think overall quality, overall content, like the finality of it, the epicness of it, like I have it S. Clearly S for me. He's gonna say A, isn't he?
Personally, it's the personal thing. It's probably an A for me, and it's only because of it's not my type of combat. Like it's just not my gameplay. The fights were cool, you know. The icons were kind of on rails at moments, which were fine as long as it was fun. But just a majority of the fights were just a scripted button press, you know. Halfway through it was just I had these abilities lined up that I was going to do in order, and then the fight ends. Which I mean, I guess that's a lot of Final Fantasy games at some point. You know, you get your thing, but honestly, if they would have done more with Dion, right? If he would have had, I don't know, he had his moment at the end, but like I just felt like there was a love interest there that they just
his death was so sudden at time. It felt like really abrupt. Like you just kind of got there, like, hey, little girl, heal me, which I thought would play like a much bigger role.
Right.
She's like, all right, dude, peace. And he went up, and he's the first to go. Which, like, I think that this, like, once again, I've always felt like sacrifices are fine when you write that character up, but like, you shouldn't leave threads bare, you know. Right. When you have stuff clearly there that you can kind of hook up. Now, who knows? Maybe Dion got caught on the way down, which I highly doubt, you know. But I wouldn't put it out of the realm of Final Fantasy to do that. So look, I'm not gonna end A+ because I think that's where it should fit because you and I disagree. I'll put it in S, and I'll be like a caveat, you know.
I mean, I could do A+. I don't feel like.
Oh no, I'm talking about combined us. So I do S, you do A. It would really be A+.
Yeah.
But for the sake of the video, I'm gonna put in S. It's gonna show up in S, but
just
really,
slightly, just move it slightly off kilter.
Yeah, we're gonna put that back. Yeah, can I slot that thing up? Hold on, let me. Oh wait, I messed that up. But yeah, no, I think that in terms of, you know, Final Fantasy 16. So what to you?
Actually, one other thing is the pacing of the side quests.
Oh, dude,
the fact that it was just like, here's 5 quests, and then nothing happens, and then you do some more story, and then here's 5 quests, and then there's another story, and then here's 25 quests. a little bit more story. 5 more quests, a little bit of story.
There is a bit of fluff that really prevents this game from being S+. So for me, like when I look at 16, I just add the A+ row, by the way. I think the one thing that really holds this game back is like some of the repetitive mission structure, some of the side quests not being as important as others. I really feel like some of the shallowness in terms of the RPG systems, especially when it comes to like crafting and stuff like that. Crafting, especially in this game, is super shallow. It's just not there's like no thought process behind it. Everything is very streamlined. So if you were looking for something as in-depth as the other titles, you were not getting that here. And I also feel like, you know, even with like the Moogle board, the hunt board, some of those fights were kind of lacking a little bit, you know. So I think like, but if we're talking main campaign, I agree. I think it's such a, to me, it's like an epic tale that hits its high a little bit too early and then doesn't like necessarily have like a crater. It doesn't, you know, have that exponential decrease, but it has like that really solid moment and then it just goes yay and then straight, you know. Like I would say, like if you put Titan and then you stack Titan with Bahamut and then you're like, all right, cool, that's got to be the peak, and then Odin would probably just be under Titan as well, and then it just stops, you know. Because even the Ultima fight, like I said, great, but still has a lot of issues, even if Clive's last like quote is amazing. Even as cheesy as it is, you know, we will be the, was it it's your Final Fantasy, we will be the witnesses.
Yeah.
That's great. But yeah, that for me is what's stopping it from being like an S+ game. What would be like your only, I mean, you already brought up a couple things, but is there anything else that stopped from being S+ for you?
Not really. Like I said, it's an incredibly polished game. The story, I think, hits 90% of the spots. You know, once again, I think, which a lot of Final Fantasies kind of have that. You're fighting your way to the big bad boss, but it's actually not the really big bad boss, and that's, you know, that's what he was the placeholder, you know. So I don't know. I felt like just the whole accumulation to Odin just seemed weird. It was almost like he was like your brother or something. It was more of just like it was like, you know, me and you were always the same. And
if they had thrown in like a family thing, I would have absolutely believed it with the way he kind of came off like Odin, the way, was it Barnabas, right? That's his name. I think
Barnabas.
Yeah, Barnabas. There you go. The way Barnabas talked to you, it's like you've known each other for a long time, but bro, we just met. Like we can't be family.
But so really, my biggest issue with Odin was the fact that like the first time that you really encounter him, he like severs every muscle in your body or every sinew, or like he like cuts every tendon in your body.
He essentially kills you.
Yeah, without killing you, and then you recover, and then you're on a ship. He cuts the sea in half. You fight him in the bottom of the ocean. He almost kills you again. You go to his house and kick his ass. Like, it doesn't make no sense to me.
I agree with that. I thought that was kind of a weird thing because there was no like actual buildup. It didn't feel earned when Clive got the win. It's like how do you go out through this whole fight, get your shit pushed in, essentially? Like he beats the crap out of you, and then you show up and you're like, no.
the only difference is you have a naked moment with your girlfriend and she gives you her power. That's that's the one difference. But it's, once again, at that point I'm not using Shiva.
Yeah.
So
it's the equivalent of like a Dragon Ball Z power up or something like that is true. Like you never even have to use Shiva during the fight, even though there was like a real poignant moment to kind of like, you know, power you up essentially. That was really weird. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. Yeah, there are some plot holes. I agree with that. So let's talk about the DLC. What are you specifically looking for? Because it's been announced, I think they said there's 2 episodes, I believe, or 2 separate DLCs that are going to be put out. I think they said they're going to talk about Clive, but what do you want to see specifically in these 2? Do you want to see the true epilogue, or do you want to see something in between because they have that time skip?
I don't know. It's with the time skip, I feel like it's just if they do that, it's just they're just kind of copying 15. Right?
You might get more Sid though.
There's just a hole.
You might get more Sid though.
Right. So one thing I want them to at least acknowledge is Leviathan. They were just like, hey, Leviathan was a thing once. So I would like to see something.
Yeah,
right?
doesn't
Maybe
Joshua mentions that in a cutscene?
Yeah,
He's like,
yeah.
Leviathan is like the last one. It's like they're lost though. How do you lose an icon?
Yeah, so like I hope that it's at least acknowledged that he's still out there, or you get to see him, or something. I don't know. It's a dream sequence or something. I don't know.
Oh, that would be a really I don't think that would ever be like recognized well. I don't think that would not review well with people. People would be very upset if it was like a dream sequence.
Or like an out of body. I don't know.
Could you imagine if like he had a dream sequence and it's like him fighting Leviathan? I would be pissed if that was the case. Because I mean, if I fight him, shouldn't I get the power or some shit like that, right? Then you have to fill in that plot hole with another DLC.
Right. And that's like I don't expect like him to like I don't expect Clive to be fighting Leviathan like with some DLC, because then unless it is part of the epilogue, he's like, I'm going to go on a quest to,
so he meets Leviathan as his spirit animal. You know what I want? I want the answer to those doors, the sealed doors that you can find throughout the environment in 16. There's a couple of them. There's one area I can't remember, but it was just after the village gets destroyed, like of where she used to be, like she was the wife of that knight who took care of you and stuff like that. He was like the captain. He like in that area when you're going back to the old castle, there's a door that cannot be accessed, and there's a number of them apparently in the world. So I want to know what's behind those doors. I assume that like, so my whole thing is
of your family.
So I mean, my thing is like, look, if Clive is the main character for both, like, but Joshua had like an entire thing where he's kind of on his own, and we're kind of learning about maybe his research and what it led to, because he has like he has Phoenix as well. So I was like, maybe we could kind of, instead of just being totally on Clive, we can just go on to Phoenix, because I don't want anything that's kind of like an epilogue to this game. I don't want a 10 tac 2 moment or a 13 tac 2 moment where Lightning disappears or Clive disappears, or like Jill and them are on the hunt for him. I think Clive dies. I really do. And if he doesn't die, then maybe he like, has his arm pretty much useless at that point, and they find him somehow. Maybe that's like the hopeful ending, right? I kind of want more about like the mysteries of the icons. I want Leviathan, one, and I want those doors. Like, I don't want anything else. I don't want to know about the time skip, because I agree with you. It's like, do we really need to know what Clive was doing during that time frame? Like, it
really didn't look like they do a whole lot of anything. It just like for 5 years they never did anything.
Yeah, like what, like they didn't make any like I mean they made headway, right? He developed as Sid's protege,
right?
Like, but there can't be anything interesting, because unless they didn't explicitly talk about like any fights they had with Clive during that time frame.
There were no major world changes.
Yeah, I expect like years, unless Kupka's like hiding shit and he's like, and he beat my ass that one time.
I would also like to see more Dion.
100%.
I just thought he was a super cool character, and they just were so. I mean, he had his moment where he killed his father and then he died at the end to kind of like
close that loop.
Redeem himself. Like, but like that was it. Like that was just the.
I thought that was
it was just a weird. I don't know. There was just so much that I was like, why is this guy not done?
I don't think we need Clive centric DLC. Is what I'm saying. I think if we do Joshua or Dion, that would be amazing. Like, give us more about Bahamut, right?
I think Clive was. I mean, you control him the entire time.
Yeah.
Like the entire the prologue was from his perspective. The game was from his perspective. Some of the speculations from his perspective. I really think they kind of explained him very well, and like his.
I think what would annoy me is if they were like, oh, let's kind of explore some of the other icons. So they go back in time and what have you control some of the fights, like Jill losing to Kupka. It's like, why would I want to lose, bro? Like, what are we doing here? I just think like if we can discover the mystery of Leviathan, and like, so like, not let's say a Clive dream sequence, let's say a Joshua dream sequence. Like he finds one of the doors and he goes like, oh shit, Leviathan's here. I know where Leviathan is. And then,
or
they have
or
some
maybe,
sequence there.
Or maybe Joshua finds Leviathan and kills him. And he's just like kind of covering it up. He's like, hey, he's lost. I don't know what happened.
Oh, that would be
a long time ago.
He's the real villain. Oh, dude, that would be.
So it's just that was just the weirdest. That was just the weirdest thing. They just you know, there's what, 7
Mhm.
or 8, including Ifrit. But
Yeah.
it was like there's like 8 icons, but one's missing. We don't know like nothing. We don't know anything other than his name, and there's a picture of him. So cool. Yeah, we're just gonna mention it this one time. It's one of the staple characters in the series.
Like I said, like I know we know it's coming, the DLC. Here's what I don't hope happens.
Go-kart.
I hope that they do not create a sequel to 16. I think it ended on the right note. Like, it's the same way I kind of felt about 10. I really think 10 didn't need a sequel. I know people wanted the finale. They wanted a happier ending, right, for Yuna and Tidus.
I think that was kind of a bullshit ending in 10.
Yeah.
He just like high fives his dad.
That's like, it's like wasn't your dad was the sin eater, bro? Like, your dad's the bad guy. What are you high five for? Later, dad. Like, yeah, my girlfriend's gone. Fuck that. And just
I think the whole premise of 10 is just really weird. Like you once existed or didn't exist, but you're like the spirit of a bunch of like 10,000 people, and like you're floating around and you become the essence. But your dad showed up like 10 years before you somehow, but you also have this memories of a real place that happened like 1,000 years ago, and then you can't touch your girlfriend at the end. She like phases through you, and you like float off into the clouds.
Why you high five him? So you high five the bad guy? Like, what are we doing here?
Your best friend's been dead the whole time. It's like spoilers, by the way, but you know, it's crazy.
Do you want 16 to have its own sequel?
I'm trying to think.
Because technically, once Clive did what he did, right, that eliminated magic, right? That removed magic from the world.
Right. Honest, I mean,
could you have a sequel is the question.
Maybe. So at the very end, you know, they do the whole sequence with like the children playing outside.
Yeah.
And the book there. I could see there being like it really wouldn't be. I mean, it would be a sequel just because it was linear in the timeline. But if they did like a re-emergence of the icons or something, right?
Yeah,
something totally different, like totally separate. Obviously, everyone's
so anyway. Clive from the future, 10,000. He's 10,000 spirits. He doesn't know Joshua's dead. He becomes the Sin Eater. They get reincarnated, and now you're Torgal fighting Clive.
Like I could see like they would have to do some type of like throwbacks to the characters, like, you know, maybe like the main character looking like Jill or something.
Correct me if I'm wrong, dude. Like the sequels, like the ending was final. Come on. Like the end, there's no way, because I've seen people talk about it, and there's been speculation that maybe 16 will get its own sequel. I think. Well, I can't.
I would say out of the Final Fantasies, 16 has like questionable, like there, it does introduce possibilities, right?
Right.
Should those possibilities be explored?
Especially considering Ultima is technically like an alien, right? So he's like an alien organism with time-shifting powers.
I mean, he's technically got. I mean, he created
he
created humans to produce magic.
So this is Prometheus.
So yeah, I mean,
it's an aliens film.
Like, you literally kill God. So it's like, what does happen? You know, does another one come?
Yeah, does another Ultima just show up? I mean, like I said, I felt like when the way they ended it. I mean, you can't go out.
Does Clive become God?
That's the point. You can't go out on like a really badass line like Clive did, right? And then have a sequel. It just wouldn't make any sense. And I get it, like, you know, Jill being sad. Like, there's still some plot that's like, did they ever recover his body? That type of stuff. Because he did like somehow survive and show up on the beach somehow. I have no idea how that happened from that height. You know what I'm saying? Even Joshua lived.
It literally looked like he blew himself up. Like,
exactly, right? I was like, how is he not dead? So maybe, you know, but there's no magic in this world anymore. And right. So I just can't see them doing it. Like I said, like you having like some weird reemergence, or they could pull some shifty bullshit and say like before Ultima was killed, he transported his consciousness to another version of himself, and he's trying to stop it against like, but this time it's not Clive, it's Joshua, and we're like, okay, whatever. You know. And now Sid doesn't die or something, like Clive dies but Sid lives. So, like, you have all these possibilities. All I'm saying is I don't need another Lightning Returns. I don't need a 10 tag 2. I think that 16 in itself does not need some sequel. You agree?
I got it. There should be a sequel, but it's you play as Jill and she's rebuilding society, right? So it just basically becomes civilization. It just becomes like Sid Meier's Civilization. You just rebuild. So you collect all the enemy or all the monsters and you start breeding them, and like it's kind of like a Jurassic Park type deal, but you know, and they start helping out in society, and they have to figure out society without magic, right? So they start utilizing like monsters for like, I don't know, mules or something. I don't know. I don't know. No,
because can we be honest? If like there was no magic, if society in Final Fantasy 16 didn't have magic, and a behemoth pulled up, you're all fucking dead. Like you're all dead.
Actually, I wrote a D&D. This is a little very quick tangent. I wrote a D&D campaign about magic being removed from a world that was heavily reliant on magic, and all the societies actually like evolved into figuring it out, except for the gnomes, just because they were physically like incapable of surviving without magic.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, they're very magic
all
dependent.
died.
It's very sad. I mean, certain like characters would die off. Certain areas would just be absolutely done because they utilize magic for their everyday needs. Now you don't have it anymore. So let's get to the closing thoughts.
Yeah, sorry.
So you're stupid tangent. 16 is sitting at an A+ for us because I gave it an S. You gave it an A. With it, pretty much, you know, we're at the end of the year. We know that 16 is going to be, you know, winning some awards, right? Ben Starr already won for his role as Clive with the Joystick Awards. He might win Best Voice Actor. When you look at 16, when you look back on 16, like, are you going to look at it fondly, or are you going to look at it as a missed opportunity to have kind of the turn-based elements from the past, like have that type of strategy? Like, would you replay this game in the same way you would the S-tier games?
Oh yeah, I would definitely revisit it at some point. You know, I am much more heavily swayed by the story, so obviously it won't have the same impact, you know, reliving it, but it's still good enough to relive. So I was gonna say something, just totally lost my train of thought.
Good. After you went on that gnome tangent, I'm gonna go.
Oh yeah. It's just it's a like the story is good enough by itself, like just the experience of going through that, right? From Clive's perspective, probably my favorite Sid in the series. 7 was pretty hard to beat, but because he was just an old man that liked to beat on women, but probably my favorite Sid.
If anybody watches to the end of this video, I want you to absolutely shit on Brett. Like, what are you talking about, man? Jesus.
Dude, that dude was angry. That was an angry man.
Angry man.
Okay, I remember what I was going to say. So when I first started playing it, right, I had the rose-colored glasses. I thought it was amazing. But there's a lot of controversy online. Like, is there really a, you know, mainline Final Fantasy game? You know, a lot of people started doing like the really heavy nitpicking with like story plot points, or, you know, you can cheese fights, whatever. And it kind of pushed me to reality, but I'm like, y'all are taking it way too far. Like just the fact that you went from like 15's development cycle to 16's development cycle, and the final product of it, like 2 totally different worlds,
completely cleaner too. Yeah.
Just because of the quality of the game, it deserves the Final Fantasy main title name.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Final Fantasy title. Like it literally deals with the crystals. Like that's the old Final Fantasy games. That's like literally, if you go through all of them, with the exception of like the most modern ones.
So
I mean, they talk about him, so he's there somewhere. It's there somewhere, you know. I think I agree with you. I think that 16 is ultimately I think it's a great game. I think it definitely has its flaws. I really like it. When I talk about it being S, I mean like it's teetering. Like I can't put it ahead of 12 or 9, or I'm sorry, 8, and I definitely couldn't put it in the S+. I mean, once again, it's all subjective. So people who watch more than likely comment like 16 is amazing, and they're probably looking at the screen because I'm going to be putting intermittent like cutscenes of like Final Fantasy 16. They're going to keep looking at 10 and be like, "What the fuck is wrong with these guys?"
Just zoom in really close to 10.
It's like, what is happening here? But I honestly believe that 16 is fine as it is, and just like a number of main entry titles in the series, it does not need a sequel. And I think that like unless the DLC completely changes the way we look at 16, I think it's good where it is. I think it's a really good modern entry. I do agree with some people that like it was a little bit too accessible in terms of its combat, but I did like the fact that it wasn't like bad combat, right? We could have had really bad combat, but instead we had like Devil May Cry types of combat. So you could be as creative as possible, but that was totally dependent on the player. Lack of strategy aside, I totally understand that, Brad. But I really feel like 16 like knocked it out of the park with its visuals, its presentation. It truly is an epic, and it deserves to be lauded as one of the best games this year.
Amazing soundtrack, by the way, and I think that is one of the awards it's going to win.
Oh, it's going to win that.
If it doesn't, I'm going to write a strongly worded letter to whoever.
To Jeff Keighley at the Game Awards.
Jeff Keighley.
with their questionable like their questionable games anyway. So that's gonna do it for this episode, or this show, or this video, whatever. Leave a comment below if you disagree completely with everything that we said. Look, I know that some people are gonna focus on 10. That's completely fine. Blame Brad. Like I said 10 should have been an A. All right. I'm Ken. That's Brad from Pixelated Thoughts, and we will talk to you next time.